I'm going to show you how you can level up your portrait by adding background elements, showing you a range of graphite supplies that a lot of people don't know about, and how to use multiple reference images to construct the background. I need to have some kind of horizon line in order to place the zombies. I'm going to make the horizon line a lot higher than most people would do because that's going to create the space up here with the zombies and will give me a little bit more of a space down here. I'm thinking I have one zombie back here that is the main zombie, and then the other zombies are going to be very small. I'm starting out so that the figures are very shadowy. I don't really need the top of this zombie's head. It should be lower than the zombie to the right. Let's put the zombie's head up here, and then that puts this one all the way at the top. This is so important when you're adding these elements, is to really pay attention to the placement and relation to each other, because before I had the two heads level, but that's really not the case, and it's also not the case with the zombie that's all the way back here. I don't use these art pencils. I strongly prefer these woodless pencils. You can see here there's no wood, and this makes it a lot easier because you can tone in areas very fast by drawing with the side of the pencil. I really like these because they come in super soft versions. When I found a 9B woodless pencil, I was in heaven. There are some zombies over here. These are going to be really small. And then maybe I'll add a few more back here. I'm going to have this zombie over here. His head, I'm going to have a line up with the female on the left-hand side. She has a little bit more of a left-leaning tilt. You can see her tilt is this way, but then his tilt is that way. And that's a compositional element where they are going in different directions that oftentimes can help with the composition. She's going to be about the same size as the zombie on the right. She also has a zombie that's right next to her. Now I need to add some of the tree elements. Really, there's a whole group on this side. You'll notice also I'm not doing any line work. Everything is just a really basic area of tone. I'm trying to fill in the bulk, and that's a little bit lower than the feet of the other one. That's a good comparison to make. He also has a little bit of a diagonal lean. Okay, this zombie has a very small head. Let's really articulate that. And the shoulders, the right shoulder is higher than the other. And I am going to take the time to articulate with more line, maybe the collar of the clothing. Key things like where the shirt comes down. Here I'm not really looking at the arms. I'm looking more at the creases in the clothing. Those are the darkest. I'm looking for shapes. For example, there's a pretty dark upside down triangle here. You can see now that I have this base of tone, it doesn't feel that difficult to go in and start adding some of these other shapes. And I'm pressing down pretty hard. I always say that if your drawing board is not shaking, you're not pressing hard enough. I think I made the zombie too wide. Let's trim him down a little bit. Let's move the arm over. I think I put it too far to the left. And I do want to figure out a more solid contour. So here I'm doing more of a line. But you can see it's a back and forth. It's not all line and it's not all tone. The jawbone, very important landmark for this particular zombie. One of the reasons I don't want to do a lot of line is I don't want this zombie to have remotely the same amount of detail. So by drawing him in this very fuzzy manner where nothing is clear cut, his head is too straight. I'm going to go in with the side of an eraser. That collar of his shirt, I'm just trying to pick points of emphasis. It's okay to make a big mess like this. You have to if you want to be willing to make those changes. That's a much better lean. I think I didn't have that before. This is a very dark shadow that's under the right arm. And I am now starting to really add a lot of lines. You can see this particular figure, it's very geometric looking. But for me, I think it's easier to start that way and then make changes later on. Let's bring that down so I can get some more shoulders. Let's go in and pull out some of the highlights, which I totally lost. Left side of the face and also a little bit of the neck. Another thing I do a lot with figures is I'll pull out the space that's behind the figure, and that can really help me see the silhouette. A lot of this is defined by the shapes in the background and not on the outline. It's really a series of tweaks. Nobody has to nail it the first time. I mean, I don't know anybody who can. You have to keep comparing this one to that one. I oftentimes feel like sketching what's in between the figures is more helpful than drawing the outlines. I know that a lot of people don't like to add backgrounds to their portraits. People will tell me that adding a background will distract from the portrait. But if you have a portrait that has no background at all, you're missing out on so many things that can make your portrait feel so much more in depth. You have to make sure that the background is always secondary to that portrait. This female figure on the left, I'm going to make her a little smaller. I don't think I want her to be the same height as this one. We're going to shrink her down quite a bit, and I'm going to move her over to the right because I want to leave space for some of the other ones that are on that side. So she used to be here. I've now moved her over here. I think what's hard about graphite is graphite in general, it just doesn't want to go down quickly. You have to put just so much physical pressure. This is going to be the bottom of her body. The other zombie is over here, and he's smaller and higher. Try to get a variation of width, so some of the trees are thinner. Time to step back and see what I can do with the eraser, because I have to figure out how the background aligns with him. For example, is the background behind his beard much darker? I'm going to make some pretty dramatic strokes, because up here, there's a lot of leaves. Here I have to decide which is going to be darker, the floor of the forest or his clothing. I've decided I want to make his clothing darker, and then this will stay lighter. That's a big difference with the portrait, is you have to make decisions like that. We're going to get the trees a lot more solid because I want to find out, okay, where are the pockets of space? So I'm going to have some white back here, throwing in a couple branches going this way. And then maybe over here we can be a little darker and a little bit looser. This is more an indication of the leaves that I'm doing right now. I do have these blending stumps, but I don't really use them that much. Once in a while, if I really want to get a tone to spread in a softer manner, I will use them. But to me, it's really important in my drawing that it doesn't get too smudgy. I much prefer to push an eraser into the drawing so I can get a mark that's a little bit more tense. When you blend everything to death, your drawing ends up looking pretty mushy and it lacks the structure that is necessary. At this stage, the portrait is so discombobulated. I'm okay with that, though. I think it's a lot better and more efficient to just throw down as much pigment as possible and then to go back and clean it up later. Sometimes people get really nervous about putting down a lot of marks because it does feel like a mess. I mean, I look at that right now and it just feels like utter chaos because nothing matches and things are drawn in different styles, but you've got to start there. It is so much easier to have too much on your drawing than to have not enough, because that's what usually leads to the tones feeling very thin. You really want to have a lot of pigment on the page because that creates this robust, beefy feeling. You also have to think about the edge of the portrait where it touches the background. What happens if you don't think about that relationship? Sometimes the portrait ends up looking like it's cut out, pasted on top of that forest, and then the forest ends up looking like a cheesy backdrop that's on a stage. A lot of it has to do with edges. You'll notice there are certain parts of the portrait where things like hairs on his beard are extremely high in contrast, a lot of details, but then there are also a lot of portions where the edge of the portrait is very similar in value to the background that is next to it. That is the toughest thing.